Okay, so I want you to just imagine something for a minute. Picture this. You're standing in a courtroom. The tension is, it's thick. And the judge starts reading your sentence. You've been convicted of graft, corruption. And it's not 5 years. It's not 10. The judge hands down a sentence of 203 years.
2 centuries. I mean, that's a number that's hard to even comprehend.
Right. It's a mathematical guarantee you are never, ever seeing the outside of a prison again. It's the kind of sentence that screams, we are throwing away the key.
And melting the lock. It sounds like something reserved for, I don't know, a mass murderer, the absolute worst of the worst.
You would think so. But this was a real sentence. It was handed down to a man named Rama Ponce de Leon way back in 1989.
Ah, the Ghost Road projects.
That's the one. He was convicted on 27 counts of graft for basically building roads that didn't exist. 203 years.
But here's the image I really want you to hold in your head as we get started today. Despite that number, despite the gavel, he didn't spend a single day in jail. Not one. And that's the part that just defies all logic, right? It breaks the fundamental contract of a justice system. You do the crime, you're supposed to do the time. But that rule seems to have some exceptions.
Big exceptions. He went into hiding, he surrendered years later, and then, and this is the kicker, just hours before he was supposed to finally start that sentence.
Poof! The executive branch steps in.
Pardon. Just like that. 2 centuries of prison time. Gone. Evaporated.
And that story, as incredible as it sounds, it's not an outlier. It's the prototype.
Yeah.
It perfectly sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today. We're not just looking at one guy who got a lucky break. We're dissecting the entire anatomy of impunity.
Exactly. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is January 22nd, 2026, and we are tackling a monster of a topic. We are doing a comprehensive audit of the biggest Philippine corruption scandals all the way from that 1989 case through the end of 2025. We want to understand the machinery.
And for that, we're drawing a lot from a really fantastic analysis by the political scientist Nathan Gilbert Quimpo. It was published in Rappler just last month, December 2025. And what makes it so good is that it goes beyond the headlines, beyond the who stole what. It looks at the mechanics of the aftermath.
It's less about the heist and more about the getaway car.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. So the mission today isn't just to list off how many billions were lost. Those numbers will probably make your head spin. Our mission is to uncover the pattern. Quimpo lays out what he calls this cycle of corruption. And it's not a straight line, it's a loop.
A loop that ensures survival for the powerful. Quimpo breaks it down into about 7 stages. You've got the ones we all know. The uncovering, the investigation, indictment, and maybe punishment?
Maybe.
Maybe. But then you have the stages that happen after the cameras go away. The reversal, then rehabilitation. And finally, the stage that matters most, the return to normal.
That return to normal is everything. That's what we need to unpack. We need to understand why the so-called big fish so rarely stay caught. And how in the world do they not only stay out of jail, but get reelected? So, yeah, buckle up. We're going 35 years deep to see how this machine really works.
And if we really want to understand that machine, the best place to start isn't at the beginning, with the crime. We should start at the very end of the assembly line, stage 7, the return to normal. Or, to use Quimpo's term, rehabilitation and relegitimation.
The phoenix rising from the ashes moment. We touched on the Ghost Road projects, but let's just dig in there for a second because it really sets the precedent for how a pardon works. It's not just forgiveness, it's a complete reset button.
It absolutely is. I mean, look at the mechanics of that Ponce de Leon case. He was convicted in 89 and again in 98, so the courts actually did their job. The Sandigan-Bayan, which is the special anti-graft court, they looked at the evidence and they said, yep, you're guilty. You built ghost roads.
And a 203-year sentence is meant to be a statement. It's the judiciary basically screaming, this has to stop.
But the enforcement side just completely collapsed. He hid for almost a decade. And when he finally surfaces in 2007, the executive branch steps in immediately. President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo pardons him, and the cycle is complete. Convict to free man, just like that.
The message it sends is that the courts can say whatever they want. At the end of the day, the executive branch holds the ultimate trump card.
Exactly. And that power of the pardon. I mean, if we really want to talk about the ultimate comeback story, the absolute gold standard for the return to normal,
it has to be Jutengate, the ERAP plunder case. This is the one that really warps the mind.
This is the case study that defines modern Philippine politics when it comes to accountability. I mean, just look at the arc. You have a sitting president, Joseph Irap Estrada. It's 2000-2001. He's impeached for taking bribes from Juteng, the illegal numbers game.
And then he's ousted by massive street protests, EDSA 2. I remember it so clearly. It felt like a revelation. It felt like accountability was finally real.
And for a moment, legally it was. In September of 2007, the Sandiganbayan finds him guilty of plunder.
Now, we should probably define plunder for a second, because it's a very specific crime in the Philippines.
It is. It's a capital offense. To be guilty of plunder, a public official has to amass ill-gotten wealth of at least 50 million pesos. It's non-bailable, and the penalty is life imprisonment.
So it's the heavyweight championship of corruption charges.
It's the biggest one you can face. And Estrada was the first national official in history to be convicted of it. The sentence was life reclusion perpetua. But here's the crucial part. The sentence also came with an accessory penalty. Perpetual absolute disqualification from holding any public office.
Perpetual? I mean, that word sounds pretty final. Airtight.
It's meant to be. It means never again. You're done.
Except, in the Philippine context, perpetual turned out to be, what, 6 weeks?
6 weeks? It's unbelievable. Just 6 weeks after that perpetual conviction, President Arroyo grants him executive clemency, a full pardon. And this is where the return to normal gets really interesting, legally speaking. His lawyers argued that because the pardon restored his full civil and political rights...
The ban on running for office was also wiped away.
Exactly. They argued the disqualification was nullified. It wasn't just, you don't have to go to jail. It was, you're as good as new, politically.
So a pardon isn't just a key to get out of jail. It's a key to get back on the ballot.
That's precisely it. And what happens next? He runs for president again in 2010.
Just think about that. A man convicted of plundering the nation is a candidate to lead it again only 3 years later.
He lost that race to Noynoy Aquino. But the fact that he was even on the ballot is the victory for the cycle. It proves it works.
And then he didn't stop.
Nope. In 2013, he ran for mayor of Manila, the capital city, and he won.
So you go from convicted plunderer facing life in prison to mayor of Manila in, what, under a decade? That is a masterclass in relegation.
And it doesn't just stop with him. The legacy, the brand is so resilient. His son, Jingoy Estrada, was also tangled up in these cases. He was acquitted in the Juateng case, but then he got caught up in the pork barrel scam later on.
Right.
But what happened to his career? He won Senate seats in 2010 and then again in 2022. It shows the family name can withstand these massive corruption allegations.
And since you brought it up, let's talk about the pork barrel scam, because that's another perfect example of this.
Yeah.
This double standard in who gets to return to normal.
The PDAF scam, 2013. 10 billion pesos looted through Janet Lim Naples and her network of fake NGOs. It was a huge, huge scandal.
That was all anyone could talk about.
But look at the split in the outcomes. You see the operators, the private citizens like Naples and her staffer Richard Cambic. They got the book thrown at them. Life imprisonment. Naples is still in the correctional institution for women today.
Okay, so the system worked for them. But what about the politicians? The lawmakers whose signatures were on the papers that released billions of pesos to those fake NGOs. They were the gatekeepers.
Well, that's a very different story. You had Senators Bomber Villa, Juan Ponce Enrile, and Jingo Estrada. All were cleared of plunder.
How? I mean, how is that possible?
The courts essentially ruled that while money was clearly lost, the prosecution failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the senators themselves pocketed the specific 50 million peso threshold required for a plunder conviction.
So a technicality on the amount.
A very crucial one. So they were cleared. And where are they now?
Back in power.
Exactly. Revilla and Jingoy went right back to the Senate, reelected. Juan Ponce Enrile, even at his age, became a cabinet member, the chief presidential legal counsel.
It's just that the contrast is so stark. And Naples is in jail for life. Yeah. Her employee, Richard Camby, he actually died in prison. But the lawmakers who made the whole thing possible, they're back in their old jobs making laws.
And that is the absolute essence of the return to normal. The system seems engineered to punish the hands that do the stealing, the operators, but not necessarily the powerful minds that authorize it.
Now, you said the stage 7, the final stage. But a lot of these scandals, they never even get close to stage 7. They don't need a pardon because they never even get a conviction. They just die a quiet death much, much earlier in the process.
That's right. And that brings us to the next big theme here. We can call it the insufficiency of evidence phenomenon. This is how cases stall out and die during the investigation or indictment stages. They drag on for years, the public forgets, and then poof, they're gone.
That phrase, insufficiency of evidence, must be music to the ears of defense lawyers in the Philippines. Let's look at the NBN ZTE scandal from 2007. I feel like this is one where everyone remembers the acronyms, but maybe not the details.
It was a massive deal at the time, a $329 million national broadband contract with a Chinese firm. But it was allegedly padded by about $130 million for kickbacks. The players were the absolute top tier. President Arroyo, her husband Mike Arroyo, the Election Commission Chair Benjamin Abalos.
I remember the testimony. The moderate, the greed line. That was everywhere. Became a national catchphrase.
Exactly. That came from Romulo Neri, the socioeconomic planning secretary. He testified that Abalos told him they had to moderate the greed on the kickbacks. Now, in the end, the contract was canceled due to the public outcry, which is, a small victory. The government saved the money. But in terms of accountability...
You'd think that testimony, moderate the greed, would be pretty strong evidence, right? A direct quote about corruption.
It wasn't enough. In 2016, that's 9 years after the scandal first broke, the Sandigan-Bayan dropped the graft charges against the Arroyos and Abalos.
On what grounds?
Insufficiency of evidence. The court said the prosecution just failed to prove the essential elements of the crime. It was all circumstantial, they said.
Unbelievable. What about Neri, the guy who kind of blew the whistle?
The Supreme Court did find him guilty of misconduct. That was in 2021. But the penalty, he was just barred from government service, no jail time for anyone.
So for a $130 million kickback scheme, the only real consequence was one guy lost his government job.
That's it.
It really feels like there's this strategy of just letting the cases drag on until everyone's forgotten the details and then they get dismissed. Like the fertilizer fund scam.
From 2004, the Jininchuang Masaganangani program, 728 million pesos. Supposed to be for farmers' fertilizer, but it was allegedly diverted to President Arroyo's re-election campaign.
The key figures were Jacques Belante and Luis Lorenzo, right? The agriculture guys.
They were. But what happened to them?
Let me guess.
Dismissed.
Dismissed. Sandigan-Bayan, 2016.
Yeah.
Same year as the ZTE case. And the reason, weak evidence. The paper trail, they said, just wasn't strong enough.
And what about the politicians who were implicated? I remember Lito Lapid's name came up in that one.
It did, and his case is interesting. The Supreme Court actually revived the graft case against him in 2019 after it had been dismissed.
So it's still technically active.
It is, but has it hurt his career? Not one bit. He won a Senate seat in 2019, and then he got reelected in 2025. So the return to normal can happen even before the case is officially dead. The voters just seem to compartmentalize it. It's like a Teflon coating. Nothing sticks.
Let's talk about the Euro generals in 2008. This one always seems so blatant to me. The evidence was literally in a suitcase.
It was so visual, wasn't it? Top officials from the Philippine National Police get caught at an airport in Moscow. They had 105,000 euros in undeclared cash.
Which is almost 7 million pesos.
And they claimed it was for intelligence funds, for their travel allowances.
So they were caught, literally red-handed, with the cash. How is that not an open and shut case?
You'd think it would be. But no. In 2019, the graft cases against pretty much everyone involved were dismissed.
Don't tell me.
Insufficiency of evidence.
You're kidding me.
One of the generals, Eliseo de la Paz, he was fined.
Okay, so there was some punishment. A fine. How much?
200,000 pesos.
Yeah, hold on. They were caught with almost 7 million pesos, and the penalty was a 200,000 peso fine.
That's correct.
That's not a punishment. That's just a 3% tax on the money they were carrying. It's a slap on the wrist, and no prison time. The message it sends is that the risk of getting caught is incredibly low. And even if you do, the consequences are manageable.
We have to cover the PCSO fund scandal from 2012. This was when we saw all those images of Gloria Arroyo in the hospital with the neck brace.
Right. And this case is really important because it introduces a legal doctrine that made plunder convictions much, much harder.
The main plunderer doctrine.
Exactly. So Arroyo and others were charged with plunder for misusing 366 million pesos from the Philippine Charity Sweepstakes Office intelligence funds. She was under hospital arrest for years. But in 2016, the Supreme Court acquitted her.
Why? Was the money not missing?
Oh, the money was misused. But the Supreme Court's ruling said that to prove plunder, the prosecution must identify a single main plunder, the one person who was the mastermind and who accumulated the bulk of the wealth.
But the prosecution charged them as a conspiracy, right? Saying they all did it together.
They did. But the court said, in essence, you haven't shown us which specific person was the boss of this scheme. Because they couldn't point to one main plunderer, the whole conspiracy charge just fell apart.
So if a group of people steal together, but you can't prove who was in charge, then everyone walks free.
That's pretty much the precedent that ruling set. It raised the bar for proving plunder incredibly high.
And what happened to Arroyo after that acquittal?
She didn't just fade away. She ran for Congress, she won 5 times, and she even became the Speaker of the House.
It just goes to show how these legal technicalities and high standards of evidence become these massive loopholes.
And sometimes the evidence isn't just insufficient, it's made completely inaccessible by the very institutions that are supposed to be guarding it.
Which brings us to our next section.
Huh.
The role of the ombudsman and the lost billions.
The ombudsman is supposed to be the tanad bayan, the protector of the people. They're the special prosecutor for crimes by government officials. But as Quimpo's analysis shows, that office can be the place where justice either moves forward or dies completely.
And the Garcia plea deal is probably the most tragic example of that.
It really is. This was back in 2005. A military general, Carlos Garcia. His sons get caught at the San Francisco airport carrying $100,000 in undeclared cash.
Another airport bust. You'd think they'd learn to use wire transfers.
You would, but this bust triggered a huge investigation back home, and they found Garcia had 303 million pesos in ill-gotten wealth. He was charged with plunder.
So a life sentence on the table.
Right. But in 2010, the ombudsman at the time, Mercedes Gutierrez, made a plea deal with him. Garcia pleaded guilty to lesser crimes, like bribery. In exchange, the big one, the plunder charge, was dropped.
So he avoided life in prison.
He did. But the controversy over that plea deal led to a Senate investigation, and that investigation uncovered something even bigger, something systemic.
The Paban system.
The Paban system. The word literally means send-off money, like pocket money. But in this context, it was tens of millions of pesos taken from military funds and given to retiring generals as a sort of golden parachute.
The revelations from that hearing were just devastating. It was so shameful for the military.
It was, and it led to a real tragedy. The former Armed Forces Chief of Staff, General Angelo Reyes, was implicated in the hearings. He was so humiliated by it all that he went to his mother's grave and committed suicide.
I remember that day. It was just this heavy, dark moment for the whole country. It felt like the weight of all this corruption had literally claimed a life. But did that tragedy lead to any real justice? Did they clean up the Paban system?
In terms of accountability, no. The Department of Justice recommended charging 11 other officers, but not one single person was ever charged or convicted specifically for the Paban scheme.
So the system itself was never held accountable.
Never. The issue was basically buried along with the tragedy.
And speaking of opaque systems, you can't talk about the ombudsman without talking about hidden wealth and the international leaks. The Panama Papers, the Pandora paper.
Right, these huge document dumps that named all these powerful Filipino families, Imi Marcos, the Gatchalians, the Angaras. They all showed up.
But to investigate that, you need access to their financial records here at home.
You do. And this is where the ombudsman's role became extremely controversial under Ombudsman Samuel Martires.
You're talking about what he did with the SALN, the Statement of Assets, Liabilities, and Net Worth.
Exactly. The SALN is supposed to be the most basic tool for transparency. If a public official's net worth suddenly jumped by 50 million pesos, the SAN is how you're supposed to catch it. But Ombudsman Martires issued a new rule. He said that from now on, you could only get a copy of an official's SAN if you have their notarized consent.
Which is a complete catch-22.
Yeah.
Why would anyone hiding wealth give you notarized permission to investigate them?
Of course not. It effectively killed any independent lifestyle check investigations. It built a bureaucratic wall around the evidence. If you can't see the assets, you can't prove there's a problem. The cycle stops dead at stage 2, investigation.
And one more quick one from this period. The Pastilla scandal in 2020. This
Yep.
one was almost cartoonish. Bribes literally wrapped in paper like candy.
Like the sweet milk candy pastillas. It was a scheme at the Bureau of Immigration to let Chinese nationals enter the country illegally for a fee.
So what was the outcome there?
Well, some officials were dismissed. But then you see the cycle of rehabilitation in action again. In a bizarre turn, one of the officials who was dismissed for his involvement, Vincent Bryan Alice, was later appointed acting chief of the Bureau of Immigration's Border Control Unit.
Wait, hold on. The guy who was fired for the border control scandal was later put in charge of border control.
That's the return to normal. In its purest form, it suggests that even if you're caught, even if you're dismissed, the system can find a way to bring you back.
Okay, I have to admit, it's all getting pretty bleak.
Yeah.
We have to ask the question. Does anyone ever actually get convicted and stay convicted? Are there any exceptions at all?
There are. They're rare, and they often come with their own asterisks. But Quimpo does highlight a few cases that we can call the rare convictions.
You mentioned the Malampaya Fund earlier. There was a specific case, Malampaya 1, that involved the governor of Palawan, Joel Reyes.
Yes, and this is a very recent development. This just happened in late 2025. Joel Reyes was convicted of 11 counts of graft. It was related to over 1.5 billion pesos in bogus contracts. And his sentence, 66 to 110 years.
So a huge sentence. Similar to the Ghost Roads guy from the beginning. Why do you think this one stuck when so many others fall apart?
That's a great question. It might have to do with the distinction between local and national power. Reyes is a powerful provincial governor, no doubt, but he's not a senator, he's not a president. Now, contrast that with the other Malampaya case, Malampaya 2 from 2009. That one involved national figures like President Arroyo and her budget secretary, Rolando Andaya.
And what about that one?
Those plunder charges were dropped. It seems the closer you are to the absolute center of power in Manila, the more legal insulation you have.
Okay, but then there's the biggest name of all, Imelda Marcos. She was convicted in 2018.
She was guilty on 7 counts of graft. The Sanagan Bayan sentenced her to prison.
But we all know she never went to prison.
Right. She immediately appealed to the Supreme Court. And while that appeal is pending, which can take years and years, she's been granted what they call provisional liberty.
They usually grant that based on age and health, right?
Correct. So on paper, if you look at Quimpo's cycle, we are at stage 4, punishment. There's a conviction. But in reality, the sentence is completely unimplemented.
So it's conviction in name only.
Exactly. It reinforces this idea that for a certain class of person in the Philippines, jail time is effectively optional.
Okay, let's bring this all the way up to today. We're in January 2026. Quimpo's piece in Rappler was looking at the landscape as of late 2025. What are the current sagas that are still playing out?
Well, the biggest one, without a doubt, has to be the impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte.
Right. That was all over the news at the end of last year.
The House of Representatives voted to impeach her, and the charges were serious. Misuse of 254 million pesos in confidential funds, bribery, allegations of hidden wealth. It looked like the cycle was actually moving forward.
It reached stage 3, indictment, or the equivalent for an impeachment.
But then it hit a wall, a very technical wall.
The Supreme Court stepped in.
They did. They ruled that the impeachment was unconstitutional because it violated the 1-year ban on multiple impeachment proceedings against the same official.
Can you just break that down? What does that ban mean?
So the Constitution says you can't initiate more than one impeachment proceeding against an official within a 1-year period. The court found a procedural error, basically saying that a previous failed attempt to file a complaint had started the 1-year clock.
So she wasn't cleared on the merits of the case? She wasn't found innocent?
Not at all.
She was cleared because of the calendar?
Precisely. The court didn't say she didn't misuse the funds. They said, your timing is wrong. You can't impeach her right now.
And the next window to file a complaint opens?
February 2026, which is next month. So this story is far from over. But it's a perfect example of how procedural law can be used to delay and sometimes completely derail substantive justice.
What about the Pharmaly scandal, the big COVID-era controversy?
That one has actually seen a surprising revival. Remember, this was the small, undercapitalized company that somehow won billions in government contracts for overpriced face masks and shields.
It seemed like that case had gone completely cold.
It had. For a long time, under Ombudsman Martires, it just stalled. But in 2025, under the new ombudsman, Jesus Crispin Ramula, things started to move. Arrest warrants were finally issued for the former health secretary Francisco Duque and for Christopher Lau.
So a change of leadership at the ombudsman's office can actually make a huge difference.
It's immense. It shows that these institutions are only as strong or as politically willing as the people who are leading them at any given moment.
And one last one, the Udena Malampaya deal, the one involving Dennis Huey.
This one is a case of legal whiplash. The ombudsman first dismissed the graft complaint back in 2022. Then in 2024, it reversed that decision. And then in August of 2025, they formally charged the former energy secretary, Alfonso Cusi, and others.
So it's a flip-flop.
A total flip-flop. And it shows that dismissed doesn't always mean it's over, just like convicted doesn't always mean you're going to jail. These legal battles can just seesaw back and forth for years.
Which you have to think is part of the strategy. Just wear out the public's attention span.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's try to wrap our heads around all of this.
Sure.
We've gone through 35 years of scandals, from ghost roads to overpriced face masks. What is the one big takeaway here?
The biggest takeaway, I think, is that we have to stop thinking about corruption in the Philippines as a linear event. Crime, investigation, punishment. It's not. It's a cycle. And the most important and most active parts of that cycle are the later stages, the reversals, the pardons, the dismissals on technicalities, and the full-blown political rehabilitation.
It's that return to normal that's the most powerful and really the most damaging part of it all. It's not just that people get away with it, it's that they come back. They go right back to the Senate or the House or the mayor's office.
And that normalizes it. It completely normalizes corruption. When a man convicted of plunder can run for the highest office in the capital city and win, what message does that send? It sends the message that corruption is just another political hazard you have to navigate, not a moral failing that disqualifies you from public service.
And I think that leads us to the final, really uncomfortable question I want to leave with you, our listener, today. We spent this whole time talking about the courts, the ombudsman, the presidents, the politicians. But if the final stage of the cycle, the end of cycle, is almost always re-election, then what is our role in all of this?
That is the big question, isn't it? The system allows them to run again, that's true, but it's the voters who allow them to win. So is the system just designed to wear the public down until we give up and forget? Or are we, as an electorate, active participants in this return to normal? Maybe because we end up prioritizing a familiar name over a clean record.
It's definitely something to think about as we watch the news unfold in 2026. Is this the year something changes, or are we just watching that same wheel turn one more time?
History suggests the wheel keeps turning, but, understanding the mechanism, understanding how the wheel works, that's the first step to figuring out how to jam the gears.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Stay curious, stay critical, and we'll catch you on the next one.